I was told to wear a bow tie.
Yeah, well, so you don't have to do that.
Well, I looked around.
Didn't
I
have one?
Well, I had one. It was
You clip it
it was
on or
grungy.
something?
It was grungy.
That's all right. Okay, great. So I run through a list of questions that I got put together here and pretty much go down the list with each of the candidates, so I get a pretty good idea of where people stand on all of the various issues. So if you don't mind, we'll just dive in.
That's it.
I know you're probably a busy guy. First question I always start with is, what's your view of the role of city government?
The role of city government is to take care of things that the individual citizens can't do for themselves, things that are too local for the state government or for the federal government to be involved in.
Such as?
Local law enforcement and trash collection. Although they might contract for these things, they still have to collect the money to pay the contractor. And then sewers, water. These things are very personal, very local to the people. That would be my idea of the role. Now, there's a lot of mission creep. Somebody might come along to the city commissioners and say, hey, we have to have an initiative on the city level to preserve habitat for the endangered flippy bird. Well,
Right.
What I think is there are some things that are core government functions. And like, for instance, the flippy bird, if there is such a thing, probably should be pursued by the nonprofit Flippy Bird Society.
Right.
Yeah, so that's an awful example,
Yeah.
but
Right.
Right.
You didn't say anything about zoning.
Well, I think I'm zoned out. Yeah, they certainly have a master plan and they have local zoning, and sometimes they're surprised at what their master plan and their zoning ordinances say. They get into a situation with Walmart, for instance. They all thought it would be just fine, and turned out it wasn't.
Yeah.
So, and it was so hard to you had to have the wisdom of God to know what the neighborhood wanted, because some of the people wanted one thing, and others wanted others, and it's like, well, we want to represent the community, and if the community is divided, whoa.
What do you do?
Yeah. You have hearings and hearings and hearings and hearings, and finally you have to make a decision.
Well, they have to follow the law of the city.
I think
said.
they did, and that's a situation where nobody bothered reading it, I guess.
Yeah.
Or if they'd read it, they hadn't understood it.
So next question is, what would you say are the 3 to 4 most pressing issues you see facing the city, and what would you do about them if you had the proverbial magic wand?
I do have the proverbial magic wand.
All right.
You see it?
Yeah.
It's magic, so it's not real visible. Number one is going to be the budget. Now, the budget is variously described. Depending on who's counting, it can be 180 million in the hole and gaining on it by 5 million a year, which is what it was 2 years ago. Or this year, it can be 459 million in the hole. And Stan Zimmerman said he fact-checked it, and the 459 million wasn't true. So I guess he knows more than I do. So it's probably somewhere in between those. But the 459 million, it was an assumption based on a 5% return on the city's pension investments.
Which haven't been generating that.
I don't think they have.
No.
I think that's very unrealistic. But that 459 million was predicated on that assumption.
Mm-hmm.
So with that assumption, let's say 459 million. Of course, what if it was only 2.5%? Well, then it would be $1 billion. You know,
Right.
yeah. I mean, it's like, how much further can we get into debt before we have to do something about it? So that's number one. You want 4?
3.
3. Okay. You know, that's just about number 2 too, because everything that we do is relative to that. It's like having a knife plunged into your back. The only thing you can think of is that knife.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say we were to pick a distant second. I suppose traffic is the next one. We're just, well, do you drive much?
I do.
Okay, well, did you drive much at Sarasota 30 years ago?
No, I moved here in 95.
Okay, so the situation has gotten much, much worse in the 32 years I've been here. And
More people, more cars.
Well, yeah, and more buildings. And they say if you build a building, if you build it, they will come.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they will. They will come. And when they do come, they'll come in cars. And when they're here, they're going to park those cars. And when they leave, they're going to leave in cars. And everybody else is also on the road too. You say, oh my goodness. So I understand what the other candidates are talking about when they say, well, there's a vacant lot over here. We've got to build a skyscraper on it. Well, they don't understand what I'm saying when I say Sarasota is built out, not in terms of vacant lots, but in terms of being able to handle the traffic and other infrastructure needs a building on those lots would generate. So that would be the second one, would be traffic. And you could say the third one is related, would be growth. The growth guys say, well, if you let us build this building, the building will be paying taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, gee, it will. But the building will need so much new infrastructure that its the taxes it pays, although considerable if it's a big building, will fall behind for 20 years, maybe 30. And that's what has always happened. You know, this argument, along with the...
Have you determined that somehow, mathematically, or some study or something like that?
Well, no. It's kind of a case of you walk out in the street and you say, good Lord, what's happened? I can't cross the street. You know, you push the button, the cars stop, they're all the way across the intersection. You have to walk around in between the cars, and anyone on the other street, railing's a good example, anybody on the street is, you know, trying to drive a car through all these stop cars. Now, you know, that was never like that. And so it might only be 25 years,
Yeah.
or it might be 35 years. So no, I don't have a scientific study. But is anybody going to seriously dispute this? Yeah, maybe. You know, especially if they've got a good, generous donation from one of the developers. You know, but they don't have any science behind what they're saying either. Do they?
Okay.
You know, yeah, he gave me $37,000. My God, his point of view is right. Yeah, that's science. Well, that's numbers, and it's, I guess, numbers. If you've got numbers, you've got science.
Okay, so let's take the three things. You said finance, budget. What would you say should be done about it?
We have
to fix that hole.
We have a spending problem in Sarasota.
Mm-hmm. Not in the U.S. government.
Oh, well, the commissioners aren't responsible for the U.S. government.
No, I'm saying I was referring to, who was it, Landrieu from Louisiana, and a couple of those other senators who've been making speeches lately saying that the federal government doesn't have a spending problem.
Doesn't.
Okay, anyway, back to Sarasota.
Okay,
You said we have a spending problem in Sarasota.
Well, yes. Did you know there are 45 city employees who have P cards, purchase cards? They are allowed to spend $49,999.99 per line item, with evidently no limits to the number of line items. Anytime they want, they've got the authority. They're that trusted by the city. So you've got 45 people with this kind of spending authority. Is not subject to any review, no questions asked. Now, chances are they're fairly prudent with it. Still, 45 people being as prudent as they can be with other people's money.
You know the rule about that, right?
Well, I'm not paying for it. That's the rule. Yeah. So anyway,
That's the easiest kind of money to spend.
Oh yes.
Somebody else's.
So
on somebody else.
Yes. And so these people, I don't even know who they are. I didn't get a list. I just got a number. I didn't ask for a list. I didn't want to look at them out of the corner of my eye on the street. I thought that would be just too much of a burden until I'm elected, if I'm elected. So, okay, but that much spending authority with no limits, if the guy wants to spend $250,000 in one day, he can. And it's not going to come back on his credit rating. It's going to come back on the taxpayer's credit rating. So we've got a spending problem. We've got a problem with unfunded liability of the retirement trust funds for various employee groups. And this was thrust upon us by the GASB organization, Government Accounting Standards Board. The Government Accounting Standards Board would probably fit in this room, one in each chair, and they're nice, proper, rich people who no doubt have investments. Maybe they have investments of the same sort of vehicles that all of the cities and counties and other smaller municipalities have for their, oh, wait a minute. Now they have these things, they're nearing retirement, and they're going to make a decision that's going to vastly increase demand for what they have to sell. Oh, but it couldn't be. There couldn't be any conflict of interest. So anyway, they said that we had to buy more of their stuff. And we had been in compliance with their recommendations since they started making them, which was a long time ago. And now that they've been making these recommendations for a long time, now they're saying, oh, we're sorry, we lied. The new truth is that you have to buy a lot more of this. Well, okay. Now, I talked to Chris Lyons before he retired about this a number of times, and I says, well, this is an unfunded mandate. He says, yes, he says it is. It's an unfunded mandate. He says, well, they're not going to help us with it at all. No, they're not. Well, then, we have to do it. Well, we have to do it or we'll be out of compliance. Okay, we'll be out of compliance. Whatever we do, we don't want to be that. So now we have to somehow, along with everything else we're doing, we have to start saving money for people's retirements that we've already promised them. So what I'm thinking of, we need to get, have you seen that big budget book? Well, if you notice, there's a lot of figures, but it's not broken down into what, it's broken down by department rather than line items. You know, you look for a Flippy Bird cage and you don't find it. So my suggestion is, first we got to find out what that all is. You know, start associating money with items. And at the same time, we have to write a list of core government functions. Things like traffic, water, sewers, you know, public safety, street lighting, police. You know, imagine a list that's sort of long, like, I mean, it actually would probably be pages and pages. But you start out with 5, 6, 7, they're core government functions. If you can't do that, you've got no justification for having a government if you can't take care of the core government functions. So figure out what these are. Now, the rest of it is all the rest. Okay, you prioritize all the rest. Don't be too concerned if there's some mistakes. As long as you've got the core government. So, okay, so you look through this departments that are handling the core government functions, and I know you're going to find that some of the core government functions are not being addressed.
So how would you summarize what you would really like to do with addressing the town, the city's spending problem?
This is a summary.
Deficit.
You know, I'm sorry it's so long, but there's been a lot of mission creep.
Yeah.
Okay, but you've got the 5 or 6. Now down here you've got a lot of mission creep. Now, up here you find that some of them aren't being taken care of. Well, you rob some people down here and put them up here. You know, they don't have to be working on the Flippy Bird project, right? You put them up here. So you've got people and you've got money up here. Then you establish a plan to make the investments whole and do as much of this stuff down here as you can. You're going to have to cut somewhere. You're going to have to say, well, you know, these low priority things are going to have to wait a couple years. And you do it that way.
Okay.
And I asked Chris if there was enough low priority things, and he said he thought there were, and then he beat it for the door. So
okay, now, another question. What's your position on the discussion or idea of increasing residential densities and building heights downtown?
I personally don't have a problem with density or height as long as the infrastructure, traffic, sewer, water, and libraries, schools, as long as all those things are taken care of as the building is built. So when the building opens, all the infrastructure will be there already, and we won't see a noticeable bump in traffic or anything. You know, we won't suddenly start turning on our faucet, finding that there's no water, things like that,
Right.
or flushing your toilet and finding, we've got a code brown situation here. You know,
Okay.
so that's my thing. Now, I am aware that a lot of people don't want any more growth at all.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not saying that. I'm saying what I want is unprovided for growth. Now, in effect, that comes out to being anti-growth because they're never going to agree to paying all this infrastructure because it's a tremendous figure.
You're saying what you want is provided for growth, right? Or did you say unprovided
Let's
for?
say Matt Walsh Development Corporation decides to knock this building down and build a 1,000-foot high building with room for every secretary, you know, that you can possibly hire. Well, we'd say, how are you going to take care of traffic? And if you're the typical developer, I've never known them not to, they'd say, well, let me give you 10,000 bucks. Well, 10,000 bucks won't do it. Well, let me give you 10 million. 10 million won't do it. I mean, it's,
Okay.
you know, for a building like that, it would be a lot. And they always fall short of what it is. And the studies. I went down and made public information request for all the transportation studies that have ever been done. Well, there were five transportation studies that have been done. A nice little stack of studies about that big. And I sat there at the desk in the city auditor and clerk's office, and I read through each one. And I thought, this is very interesting. They all read pretty much the same. The bottom line was, whatever project it was, there wasn't going to be any particular traffic impact. Now, the developer always pays for those studies. I don't know if he chooses the vendor, but you know, I'm certain he could object to a vendor. Well, the Publix here, the new Publix, no significant traffic impact. I live on that street. There's been a traffic impact. Well, if there's not going to be a significant traffic increase, why are they building it? Don't they want business? I think they do. And so if they're going to build a business and somehow nobody's going to come, that just doesn't pass the smell test at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, North Trail. What do you think the city ought to do about North Trail and the city commission?
There's a couple things.
If anything.
Well, there's a couple things they could do. They could add lanes, add a lane each side. I don't think they can go any wider. You notice as soon as you cross the line, you're in a 6-lane in Manatee.
Yes.
And it's been that way for 25 years.
Yeah.
And so it's needed. It's just the city fathers and maybe the city mothers have said, we don't want that. But we want redevelopment on the North Trail, but we don't want to do anything about traffic as matter. Well, yes, we do. We want to slow traffic down. We want to take one of the lanes we have and make it parallel parking. And so then we'll have one lane in each direction.